Our Across the Aisle segment tonight, Donald Trump won the presidency by convincing Americans that voted for Barack Obama that he was a better choice than Hillary Clinton. But according to our next guest, President Trump didn't do this by highlighting Hillary Clinton's corruption. He did it by playing racial politics. I disagree. With me now is professor and author of Obama's America, a transformative vision of our national identity, Ian Reifowitz. Ian, welcome to the Lion's Den. Great to have you. So, Ian, you wrote...
Good to be here, Stephanie.
You wrote an interesting piece, and I believe it's an opinion piece, and it was titled, "The Timing of Trump's Most White Nationalist Week Yet is No Coincidence." So what did you mean by that? And, explain how you came up with this conclusion.
Well, thank you for asking. It's 1 week, but it's also 1 week of a larger body of work, let's say, from the president. So I think it's important to put that into context. President Trump emerged onto the political stage, the national political stage, with birtherism. Birtherism is a clear racist trope. I'm not going to rehash the whole history, but you've got from birtherism to the speech announcing for president where he talked about Mexican rapists. You've got a whole body of work. You've got Steve Bannon, who talked about making Breitbart the platform for the alt-right. You've got a whole history of courting white nationalism and courting voters using these kinds of racially divisive rhetoric. That's certainly not the whole of Donald Trump's campaign, and it's not the whole of his policies. It's a part of it. So building on that body of work, I think what we saw this past week was another foray in that direction. Partially in reaction, I think, to the failure of Trump Care, the repeal of Obamacare. Partially, I think, in response to the release of the Democrats' economic plan, the so-called better deal. You saw a series of steps by the president which fall under the broad category of wedge issues, right, cultural wedge issues, some of which I think play into this white nationalist theme. The transgender ban, I don't believe is a white nationalist thing. That's just a general cultural wedge issue. But then you had his remarks about police brutality, right? When he said, the cops should make sure, shouldn't be so careful about, not banging the suspect's head in the car. You combine that with a larger theme talking about violent crime among undocumented immigrants, and even going beyond just talking about crime. He talked about them slicing and dicing a young girl using really graphic language.
I'm going to stop you there. First of all,
go right ahead.
So I'm assuming that you spoke out when the left was questioning, where Ted Cruz was born, because a lot of people had an issue with that, trying to relate it to the Obama and the birther issue. And again, Trump was not talking about that on the campaign trail. And either way, I think that issue's been put to rest. It doesn't matter where he was born. His mom is American, so therefore he would be qualified to run for president. And as for Mexican and rapists, I'm bicultural. My mom is from Mexico. She came to this country legally. She's in this country legally. She speaks English fluently. And it's so odd to see how Democrats versus, Republicans, how they see the president's comments when it comes to the Mexico issue. Trump, in a sense, is right. Mexico has a huge problem when it comes to the cartels and bad guys coming across the border. That's one of the reasons why my mom left that country, because of the crime and corruption. And so when he talks about rapists coming across the border, he's right. There are a lot of rapists coming across the border, and that's why a Mexican family would want the border closed off with a wall or with fence or with security. And so, aren't you concerned about the criminals that are coming across the border that are raping women in this country, that are killing people? Every other day, we're hearing stories about, the consequences, the deadly consequences of sanctuary cities. And it seems like, the left, they don't seem to care.
Well, it's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. So the question is, what is the purpose of Donald Trump talking about crime among illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, whatever you want to call them, when the reality is that undocumented immigrants commit fewer crimes than the native-born Americans? That's true for both immigrants as a whole and also for undocumented immigrants. I've done the research, again for today, although I've done it before. Sanctuary cities do not have an increased level of crime over similar demographic cities that are not sanctuary cities. in fact, areas, regions, towns, however you want to look at it, that have higher numbers of immigrants, which includes undocumented immigrants, have lower levels of violent and property crime.
No, I'm going to have to stop you there.
Immigrants
the
are
Center for Immigration.
Let me just finish. Are incarcerated at 1/3 the rate of the native born. Undocumented immigrants are incarcerated at 1/3 the rate of the native born.
Okay, well, I've seen studies that show that a lot of these cities that are harboring criminal illegal immigrants are much more dangerous than a regular city. And again, the whole sanctuary city thing, it sounds like a really nice title, but what people don't realize is that that stops police officers from doing their jobs. It stops ICE officials from being able to communicate with law enforcement. We're a nation of laws. You can't just, decide that you don't like our immigration policies and ignore them. That's just not the right way to do it. Now, and you were also complaining about, the transgender military ban all in 1 week. And, this was something that he tweeted. I think that the president should have waited until they actually had, a document or something else to give out information. And obviously there was a media frenzy over it. And I'm still, with the fact that a lot of the people that I've talked to that are in the military that have served said that, this is good policy, because under Obama, he's the one who allowed transgenders to join the military in the first place, and that had never been allowed in our U.S. history in the military. And there's reasons for it. And all of these military people that I've talked to explain that, again, that the military isn't a social experiment, and this is an experiment, and this is exactly why the Trump administration is looking at this issue.
It's another important issue. I also saw the letter signed by I believe it was either 46 or 56 generals arguing that banning transgender Americans from serving didn't make any sense in terms of readiness. And if you look at the Obama-era policy, it makes very clear that in order to join the military as an open transgender person, you have to have already undergone your surgery, come out the other end, and been living in your new stable gender for, I believe it's 18 months. So you can't be open transgender and saying, but I'm going to have the surgery next year and join the military. So what you're really talking about is whether or not people who are already in the military will be allowed to come out freely, so to speak. And any kind of situation where you have people living in secret is just not one that makes a lot of sense. You're talking about a very small percentage of the population, and you're talking about very few of them who are going to undergo the surgery because they're supposed to have already undergone it going before they went into the military. So you're talking about a tiny amount in terms of cost. John McCain, generals have all said that this is just a non-issue. Other countries have done the same thing. Look, times change. There were things that we didn't used to do in our military that we do today. It's a matter of listening to the experts. And from what I've seen, the experts are at best divided and perhaps even more in favor of keeping transgender military than not.
Well, and you said generals say that it's a non-issue. I've heard a lot of generals and people in the military say that it is an issue. And, whatever John McCain feels about it, okay, that's John McCain. But again, I'm not out there on the front line. You're not either, I'm assuming. So from what I've heard, and again, something you don't know about me, I used to actually work on some Democrat campaigns. So it's not like I'm just, right on the right on every single issue. I look at things and I examine them and I talk to people and I listen. And so that's how I come to my conclusion. And just the one last thing, you said that the immigration bill, back to immigration, the immigration bill was racist because they were suggesting that you need to speak English to come to this country. And you know that a lot of people have to take that English test. My mom had to do that when she came from Mexico. And so I don't find that racist at all. I think to be a productive person in society, you need to know the language.
I agree. I don't find the provisions of the immigration bill to be especially racist. And that's why I said it's not just what was announced this week. It's all of a body of work. It's a question of preference, giving some preference points to people who speak English. We can have a debate about that. But the larger issue is that the rhetoric around immigration has been one of fear and also one of what I call bait and switch. Well, the president talked about reducing the numbers of immigration to help working families with low-wage jobs. But every study I shouldn't say every study, the studies in general show that increasing number of immigrants, including low-skilled immigrants, does not hurt low-wage jobs. We saw, for example, in California, I think it was under Kennedy, when they decided to end the low-wage immigrant program, figuring that this would bring more agricultural jobs, more tomato picking jobs specifically to workers. What happened? The immigrants stopped coming from Mexico, the Bracero program, and they just instituted machines to pick the tomatoes instead. So it's not clear that this program would help with low-wage jobs. It's just a matter of the purpose of it, and the purpose of it in general is to raise fears about immigrants.
Okay, Ian. Well, I disagree with you on that. And I mean, it just makes sense that if more people are coming to this country when there's some like 94 million people out of the workforce, obviously we don't have jobs for them. And this wouldn't even take effect until, I believe, 2028. So there's a long time to decide if we need more people to come into this country to work. But in the meantime, I think Americans should come first when it comes to, being in line to get that job. So I disagree with you, but thank you for your time.